The winter encounter, the December wind cut through Chicago's downtown streets like a blade, carrying with it the promise of the year's first real snowstorm. Alina Rodriguez pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders as she sat on the cold metal bench at the bus stop, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. The cardboard box beside her held everything she owned now: a few clothes, some art supplies, and a photograph of her late grandmother who had raised her. Earlier that morning, Alina had been a third-grade art teacher at Lincoln Elementary. By noon, budget cuts had eliminated her position. By evening, her landlord had changed the locks on her studio apartment, claiming she was 3 months behind on rent. The truth was more complicated. She had been sending most of her modest salary to help pay for her younger brother's medical bills. Now at 26, she found herself completely alone in a city that suddenly felt as cold as the winter air surrounding her. The bus schedule posted on the shelter wall blurred through her tired eyes. The last bus to the shelter downtown had already passed, and she didn't have enough money for a taxi. Alina rested her head against the cold glass of the shelter, wondering how her life had unraveled so quickly. She thought about calling her brother Diego, but he was barely managing his own recovery from the car accident that had left him in physical therapy for months. As snowflakes began to fall more heavily, Alina watched the empty street, illuminated only by the amber glow of streetlights. Most people were safe in their warm homes, probably complaining about the weather while sipping hot chocolate. She tried not to feel bitter about it. Her grandmother had always taught her that everyone faced their own struggles, even if they weren't visible from the outside. The sound of tires on wet pavement caught her attention. A sleek black sedan slowed as it approached the intersection, its headlights cutting through the falling snow. Alina expected it to continue past, like all the other cars had, but instead it pulled over to the curb just a few feet away from her bench. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Even in the dim light, Alina could see he was expensively dressed, a long wool coat that probably cost more than she used to make in 3 months, leather gloves, and shoes that looked like they had never touched a sidewalk before tonight. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with dark hair that was already collecting snowflakes. But it wasn't the man who caught Alina's attention. It was the small face pressed against the rear window of the car. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, was watching her with curious eyes. Even through the glass and falling snow, Alina could see something familiar in the child's expression. It was the same look she had seen on her students' faces, when they were worried about something but didn't know how to ask for help. The man approached slowly, his hands visible, and his posture non-threatening. Alina tensed anyway. Living on the streets, even for just a few hours, had already sharpened her instincts. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my son noticed you sitting here, and we were wondering if you're all right." Alina looked past him to the car, where the little boy was still watching. Up close, she could see the man's face more clearly. He had kind eyes, but there were lines around them that spoke of worry and sleepless nights. His expensive appearance couldn't hide the exhaustion that seemed to weigh on his shoulders. "I'm fine," Alina said automatically. The same response she had given to everyone who had asked that question over the years. But even as she said it, her stomach growled audibly, betraying her.
Odd.
The man glanced at the cardboard box beside her, then back at her face. "My name is James Wellington," he said. "That's my son Tommy in the car. We were just coming home from the children's hospital. Tommy had a checkup for his asthma, and he insisted we stop." Elena's teacher instincts kicked in at the mention of a child with medical needs. "Is he okay?" James smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face. "He will be. The doctors are optimistic, but thank you for asking." He paused, studying her face. "Look, I know this might sound strange, but would you let us give you a ride somewhere? It's going to get much colder tonight, and the snow is supposed to get worse." Every reasonable part of Elena's mind screamed at her to politely decline and wait for morning. She didn't know these people, and accepting rides from strangers was dangerous. But as she looked at the little boy in the car, Tommy, she saw something that made her hesitate. He had rolled down the window slightly and was holding up a small stuffed elephant, offering it to her through the gap. "Patches keeps me warm when I'm scared," Tommy called out, his voice small but determined. "Maybe he can help you too." Alina felt tears prick at her eyes. In all the chaos and disappointment of the day, this child's simple gesture of kindness was almost too much too. Bear. She looked back at James, who was watching his son with an expression of such pure love and pride that it made her chest ache. I don't really have anywhere to go, Alina admitted quietly. I lost my apartment today. And my job. James's expression softened with understanding rather than pity. I'm sorry, he said simply. That's incredibly difficult. Something in his tone made Alina look at him more carefully. Despite his expensive clothes and luxury car, there was a sadness in James's eyes that matched her own. Whatever had brought them to this bus stop tonight, she realized that both of them were carrying heavy burdens. There's a shelter downtown, Alina said. If you could just drop me off there, that would be more than enough. The shelter on Madison? James asked. When Alina nodded, his frown deepened. I volunteer there sometimes through my company. Completely full this time of year, and with this storm, they're not accepting anyone new tonight. Alina's heart sank. She had been counting on that shelter as her backup plan. Tommy had gotten out of the car now, despite his father's gentle protests about the cold. He walked over to Alina with the stuffed elephant clutched in his small hands. Up close, she could see that he was a beautiful child with his father's dark hair and large, expressive eyes. Are you a teacher? Tommy asked, looking at the art supplies visible in her box. You have the same kind of markers that Miss Patterson used to have. I was a teacher, Alina said, taking the stuffed elephant. When Tommy offered it to her again, I taught art to kids about your age. Tommy's face lit up. I love art, but I'm not very good at it. My hands shake sometimes because of my medicine. Without thinking, Alina reached into her box and pulled out a small sketch pad and a pencil. Can I show you something? She asked. When Tommy nodded eagerly, she quickly sketched a simple drawing of an elephant that looked remarkably like his stuffed animal. But instead of making it perfect, she deliberately made the lines a little shaky and uneven. See how the lines aren't perfectly straight? Alina said, showing Tommy the drawing. That's what makes it special. Art isn't about being perfect. It's about showing how you see the world. And sometimes shaky lines can show emotion and life in ways that perfect lines can't. Tommy stared at the drawing with wonder, then looked up at Alina with an expression that clearly said he had found something precious. Could you teach me to draw like that? James had been watching this exchange with growing interest. When Tommy asked his question, something shifted in James's expression, a decision being made in real time. Tommy, James said gently, let's let Miss... Alina, she supplied. Alina Rodriguez. Let's let Miss Alina get out of this cold first, James continued. But Tommy, would you like it if Miss Alina came home with us tonight, just to get warm? And have something to eat? Alina started to protest, but James held up a gentle hand. I know how this must sound, he said. Stranger offering to take you home. But I can give you references. Show you my identification. Whatever you need to feel safe. The truth is, Tommy doesn't connect with people very easily. His mother died 2 years ago, and since then, it's been ... distant. But I can see something different in him right now. Alina looked down at Tommy, who was still holding her drawing like it was made of gold. The boy looked up at her with hopeful eyes. Just for tonight, James continued. You can have your own room, your own space. No expectations, no strings. Attached, just a warm place to stay and a good meal. The snow was falling harder now, and Alina could barely feel her fingers. She thought about her grandmother's voice, always telling her to trust her instincts about people. Looking at James and Tommy, her instincts were telling her something surprising, that despite the strangeness of the situation, these were good people who genuinely wanted to help. Just for tonight? Alina asked. Just for tonight, James confirmed. Unless what? James looked at his son, then back at Alina. Unless you might be interested in staying longer. Tommy needs someone who understands children. Someone who can help him with his art and his dreams. And I. James paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I need someone who can help me remember how to be the father Tommy deserves. As Alina looked between father and son, both watching her with hopeful eyes, while snow fell around them like a scene from a fairy tale, she realized that Sometimes the most important decisions in life came disguised as simple choices about where to spend one cold winter night. An unlikely proposal, the Wellington house stood like a fortress of warmth against the Chicago winter, its tall windows glowing golden in the darkness. As James's sedan pulled through the iron gates and up the curved driveway, Alina pressed her face to the window in amazement. She had seen houses like this in movies, but never imagined she would actually set foot in one. "It's too big," Tommy said, from beside her, following her gaze. "Daddy says we rattle around in here like marbles in a jar." Alina smiled at the boys. Honesty. Even through her nervousness, she could see that despite the luxury surrounding them, there was something hollow about this place. As they walked to the front door, she noticed that while the house was beautiful, it lacked the warmth that came from being truly lived in. The landscaping was perfect, but cold. The windows gleamed, but felt distant. Inside, the feeling intensified. The foyer was larger than Elena's old apartment had been, with marble floors that echoed their footsteps and a crystal chandelier that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. Everything was elegant and expensive, but it felt more like a museum than a home. "Mrs. Chen usually helps with Tommy," James explained as he helped Alina with her coat. "But she doesn't live here, and with the storm, she couldn't make it tonight." He paused, seeming suddenly uncertain. "I realize I should have mentioned earlier I'm not very good at the domestic side of things. Since my wife passed, we've mostly lived on takeout and whatever Mrs. Chen prepares in advance." Tommy had disappeared into what Alina assumed was the living room, and she could hear him rummaging around for something. When he returned, he was carrying a photo in a silver frame. The picture showed a beautiful Asian woman with kind eyes, holding a much younger Tommy. "This is my mama," Tommy said, offering the photo to Alina. "She was a doctor, like the ones who helped me with my breathing. Daddy says she's watching over us from heaven." Alina took the photo gently, studying the woman's face. There was intelligence there, and warmth, and something that reminded her of her own grandmother's gentle strength. "She looked like she was a wonderful mama," Alina said softly. "She was," James said quietly. "Dr. Linda Chen Wellington. She was a pediatric cardiologist. She died in a car accident on her way home from the hospital one night." His voice remained steady, but Alina could see the pain that still lived in his eyes. "She was everything I'm not: patient, nurturing, intuitive with Tommy's needs." Tommy set the photo carefully on a side table and took Alina's hand. "Are you hungry? Daddy makes terrible sandwiches, but we have good soup in cans." Despite everything, Alina laughed. "I would love some soup." 8. The kitchen was as grand as the rest of the house, with granite countertops and professional grade appliances that looked barely used. James moved awkwardly around the space, clearly unfamiliar with his own kitchen. Alina watched him struggle with the can opener for a moment before gently stepping in to help. "Here," she said, taking over, "the soup preparation. Why don't you and Tommy set the table?" As she worked, Alina felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Cooking had always been therapeutic for her, one of the few skills her grandmother had been able to teach her before she died. She found crackers in the pantry, cheese in the refrigerator, and before long had created a simple but warm meal. They ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, Tommy chattering about school and his art projects, while James watched both of them with an expression Alina couldn't quite read. It was during dessert ice cream that Tommy insisted was the good kind that James brought up the subject that had been hanging in the air all evening. "Alina," he said carefully, "I want to be completely honest with you about something." She set down her spoon, sensing that whatever came next would be important. "When I offered to bring you here tonight, it wasn't entirely altruistic," James continued. "Yes, I wanted to help someone who clearly needed it, but I also struggling with Tommy for months. Ever since Linda died, I've been trying to be both parents to him, and I'm failing." Tommy looked up from his ice cream, his young face suddenly serious. "You're not failing, Daddy. You just get sad sometimes." James reached over and smoothed his son's hair. "I do get sad sometimes," he agreed. "But that's not fair to you. You deserve better than a father who doesn't know how to help you with homework or understand why you have nightmares or know what to do when you want to talk about." "Mama, Alina felt her heart clench at the raw honesty in James's voice. She had seen this struggle in some of her students' parents, the overwhelming burden of trying to heal their own grief while nurturing their children through theirs. Tonight, watching you with Tommy, James continued, I saw something I haven't seen in 2 years. I saw him light up, saw him engage with someone new, trust someone immediately. That doesn't happen. He's a special boy, Alina said simply. He is, and he deserves someone who can see that and nurture it. James took a deep breath. I know this is going to sound crazy, given that we just met a few hours ago, but I want to offer you a job. Alina blinked in surprise. A job? As Tommy's nanny? His teacher, really? Someone who can help him with his schoolwork, encourage his interests. Be there when he comes home, instead of him coming home to an empty house with only Mrs. Chen checking in on him. Tommy's eyes had grown wide with excitement. You could live here and teach me to draw every day? Tommy James said gently. Let Alina think about it. But Alina was already thinking, her mind racing through the implications. I don't have any formal childcare experience, she said. Just teaching, and that was only for 3 years. You have something better than experience, James said. You have instinct, you have kindness, and Tommy trusts you. He paused. The salary would be more than generous. You'd have your own wing of the house, complete privacy, health insurance, vacation time, but more than that, you'd be giving Tommy something I can't, a chance to heal properly. Lena looked at Tommy, who was watching her with hope written across his young face. What about your father? Won't he be around? I travel a lot for work, James admitted. Usually 2 weeks out of every month. That's part of the problem. Tommy's been staying with Mrs. Chen or my mother when I'm gone, and he needs consistency. But when you're home. James met her eyes directly. When I'm home, we'd be a team. Partners in helping Tommy grow up happy and healthy. He hesitated. I know it's unconventional. I know it's asking a lot. But Alina, in one evening, you've given my son something I've been trying to give him for 2 years. Joy? Alina felt tears prick at her eyes as she looked around the kitchen. A few hours ago, she had been sitting on a frozen bench with nowhere to go and no prospects. She was being offered not just a job, but a chance to be part of something meaningful. There's one condition, she said finally. James raised an eyebrow. Name it. If I do this, I do it right. Not just a babysitter or housekeeper. I'm Tommy's advocate. If I think something isn't in his best interest, even if it disagrees with what you want, I need to know you'll listen. James smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him all evening. Deal. Tommy launched himself at Alina, wrapping his small arms around her waist. Does this mean you'll stay? Really stay? Alina hugged him back, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the lingering sweetness of ice cream. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Yes, Tommy, she said softly. I'll stay. Outside, the storm continued to rage, blanketing Chicago in snow. But inside the Wellington house, something warm and new was beginning to bloom, the first fragile shoots of a family learning to heal together.